Can everybody hear me? Do I need to turn this mic up a little bit? How about that? Is that better? Great. Well, good morning, everybody. I hope everybody had a nice evening. I hope you enjoyed the reception, did some networking, had an opportunity to reflect on what you heard yesterday. I think you're going to find that today is going to be another great day. You're going to hear a couple phenomenal panels that I think will also not only engage you, but get you really thinking about this transformation that we've been talking about. I have an administrative announcement to make, and that is that we're going to do something a little different for those of you who are signing on with your computers. You're going to have to bear with me for a second because I'm going to Rome, and well, not literally, but so what I would like to do is have everybody who, excuse me, from this row of tables right here, this row, to the front of the room, when you sign on, or if I'd ask you to re-sign on and use INSA 2. The back part of the room, still use INSA, just like you signed on yesterday. The reason for that is we doubled the T1 lines. So hopefully you'll get a faster response and you'll have an opportunity to engage a little better than yesterday. And believe me, there are lots of T1 lines coming into this hotel, and they were a little surprised when we took up as much as we took up yesterday. So if you'd sign on to INSA 2, and again, if you have any problems, Jared over here in the corner, far corner under the screen, seek him out, and he can help you get signed up and rocking and rolling. We're going to have a couple changes, or at least one change to the schedule that I want to tell you about. Actually, I'm not going to tell you about it. But you see on the agenda that today at 2 o'clock, there's a discussion with audience interaction. I'm not going to tell you what that is yet, but I think you're going to be surprised. And I think what this also does, I'll tease you by saying that I think what's going to happen at 2 o'clock is going to be the type of discussion and interaction that's going to show you the full breadth of what we're talking about when Mike and Tom and others talked about expanding the analytic community to expertise where you find it, expanding it to get the widest breadth of information, expanding it so that people understand the importance of what the intelligence community and what the analytical community is trying to do. We're getting a lot of good response from this. There's a lot of talk, not just in Chicago, by the way, and I think it's all part of a good move as we change and move forward on the transformation. What we have right off the bat is a start, and a couple people asked me yesterday, well, geez, you don't have a lot of the warfighters here. And my response to that was, well, you know, when we sat down, we talked about that. It wasn't that we didn't want warfighters here. It's that this particular session was a rollout to the private sector and academia. And everybody, and you heard a couple comments yesterday, but everybody understands that there are a series of customers, as Tom would say, that are extremely important, and the warfighter being among them. But what we do have is a very special guest to kick us off this morning, and that's Jim Clapper. And many of you in the room may know Jim, some may not. I've known Jim for quite a long time. I couldn't think of a better individual to come up here and talk about not just analytic transformation, but the impact and the necessity of getting the young workforce engaged and involved, how that affects the intelligence community across the board, and certainly how it affects the support to those warfighters. Many know that Jim was the director of DIA. He was the director of NGA, the first civilian director of NGA. And he then got coaxed out of the private sector, actually out of retirement. Let me say that. He got coaxed out of retirement from NGA, and is now the Undersecretary of Defense for Intelligence. He's also dual-hatted as the let me make sure I get this right, Jim, as the Deputy Director of Defense Intelligence, correct? Director of Defense Intelligence. How about that? So what you see in that is a tremendous linking up of the intelligence community and defense, kind of in lockstep on a lot of these transformational changes. So without any further ado, please help me welcome Jim Clapper.
Well, it's a little daunting for a geezer like me to be up here with everyone wired and laptops on the tables and all that sort of thing. Favorite saw of mine, and some of you have heard me use this before, but this conference seems to me to be so about transformation and change. And as you know, many of you know that we in the government sometimes have trouble transforming or changing. And it seems to me that what this conference is really all about is, at least, we recognize that, and we're outreaching. And so good on the Office of the DNI, the Director of National Intelligence, and INSA for putting this on. But and Gary, forgive me, you've heard this before, but I got to use it. Dakota tribal wisdom says that when you discover you're riding a dead horse, the best strategy is to dismount. But in government, we often try other strategies. We buy a stronger whip, we change riders, we say things like, this is the way we've always ridden this horse. We appoint a committee to study the horse. We arrange to visit other sites to see how they ride dead horses. We increase the standards to ride dead horses. We appoint a tiger team to revive the dead horse. We create a training session to increase our riding ability. We compare the state of dead horses in today's environment. We change the requirements declaring this horse is not dead. We hire contractors to ride the dead horse. We harness several dead horses together for increased speed. We declare that no horse is too dead to beat. That actually is my favorite. It's kind of a Beltway classic. We provide additional funding to increase the horse's performance. We do a cost analysis study to see if contractors can ride it cheaper. We purchase a product to make dead horses run faster. We declare the horse is better, faster, and cheaper dead. We form a quality circle to find best practices for riding dead horses. We revisit the performance requirements for horses. We say this horse was procured with cost as an independent variable. And my favorite of all is we promote the dead horse to a supervisory position. Anyway, I was just reminded of that. And for me, it's, as others in the audience would attest, it's always great to be away from Washington, particularly these days. Another one of my favorite saws is a line attributed to Harry Truman. You may have read about him in history books. You want a friend in Washington, buy a dog. And these days, that's kind of the way it is. Secondly, I really wanted to be a part of this event for what turned out to be kind of an epiphany event for me professionally. Since my fingerprints were on the famous or infamous National Intelligence Estimate, which addressed the presence or absence of weapons of mass destruction in Iraq. I was then serving, as Tim indicated, as the director of the National Geospatial Intelligence Agency, which is one of the members of what's now called the National Intelligence Board. And we all approved that National Intelligence Estimate, and I was one of the approvers. And so I think it kind of turned out, as many of you know, to be not exactly accurate. And I think this NIE was emblematic of many of our analytic weaknesses. And of course, it was the subject of an investigation by a Blue Ribbon Commission, co-chaired by Judge Silverman and former Senator Chuck Robb. And then, having been a subject or victim, as the case may be, of this investigation and all the others conducted in the wake of 9/11, I've sort of become a proponent of transformation of analysis in the intelligence community. And particularly now, from my current vantage as both Undersecretary of Defense for Intelligence within the Department of Defense for the Secretary, as well as Tim alluded, the Director of Defense Intelligence, which is a dual hat designation where I work for Admiral Mike McConnell, the Director of National Intelligence. As you may know, 8 of the 16 components of the national intelligence community are in the Department of Defense. 4 agencies, NSA, NGA, NRO, and DIA, and then, of course, the 4 service intelligence establishments. So I thought I'd discuss from maybe a defense perspective or a personal perspective, perhaps, sort of intertwined here, I guess, 3 interlaced issues or themes which I believe are involved in transforming intelligence analysis. And they are, and I'm sure you probably heard about this yesterday, changing the culture, automating intelligently, no pun intended, and one that sometimes we don't dwell on maybe as much as we should, which is managing customer or partner expectations. And the format I'm going to use for each of these 3 themes is kind of how it was, harking back to, say, we'll just pick 2001, and kind of things that the community is trying to do. And it seems to me what this is all about, and the feedback I've heard from yesterday's session been very, very positive, is kind of outreaching to those of you who are not in the government, not in the establishment, so to speak, and how, what else can we do? How can you help us? So first, changing the analytic culture. Just by way of background, Tim alluded to this, but I retired from the Air Force in 1995, and my last job before I retired was served as director of the Defense Intelligence Agency for 4 years. Went off to industry for 6 years and worked for 3 companies, but doing business back for the government. And then out of the blue, in the summer of '01, I got a phone call from DOD headhunter asking if I'd be interested in coming back and serving as what was then called the Director of National Imagery and Mapping Agency. And my wife wasn't too pleased about it, but I said, okay, I'd do it. And so coincidentally, I started as Director of NGA 2 days after 9/11, which was a very sporty time to be trying to run an intelligence agency. So I do have some, sort of stark images in my mind about how things were when I walked in the door after being away from the government for 6 years, and kind of where things are going now as a result of the trauma of 9/11. Typically, in 2001 or before, analysts would get their position through a college education or military experience, some regional or functional expertise, would gain a clearance based on multi-generational American heritage. And by the way, parenthetically, Admiral McConnell and I are embarked on a effort to completely reform the clearance process in the government, which we all, I think, acknowledge badly needs help. Then they would get journeyman on-the-job training, years of experience in one topic. And of course, there's a huge premium placed on mental databases of people or the shoebox files of expertise. And normally, the history, the common practice, and this is certainly the case in, say, the early 90s when I was director of DIA, a great premium placed on perishing or publishing. Producing products normally without collaboration, normally not as a collective. It was always an individual product, and it was great a great premium placed on analysts publishing and having their name on a report. And that led to, of course, the reward system. The way we appraise and reward people, which frankly hasn't changed a great deal, still I think places a premium on acknowledging or recognizing individual as opposed to collective or collaborative behavior. So what we need, of course, are, and some of this I think is perhaps a little bit of motherhood and apple pie, but I think it bears stating. We need people who can think critically and creatively. I know when I was director of NGA, we went through a huge generational change, which is still going on. In fact, the entire intelligence community, which is actually a good thing, where our experience level has gone way down. I say our NGAs, and actually this is a prevalent trend throughout the intelligence community. And people used to, particularly congressional critics, would decry this or rub their hands and worry about it. And actually, I thought it was a good thing because the younger generation is, the younger generation that's coming on now assumes leadership positions in the community. That is what is, in my mind, is really going to transform the community and change the culture. People who are brought up in a much different environment than geezers like me were. And I could see that change almost underneath our feet, if you will, at NGA, and I think that's a trend going on everywhere. And of course, this also poses some leadership challenges because in the atmosphere I grew up in the military, it was yes or 3 bags full, unquestioning obedience, and you don't do that anymore in an environment with a lot of young people who have a tendency to question, well, why do we have to do that? And the response, well, there's no reason for it, it's just our policy, is not very satisfactory. Using structured analytic techniques to mitigate bias and mindset. And of course, this is something that kind of crept into the aforementioned NIE. Seeking collaborative partners to leverage diversity of skills and backgrounds to solve challenges. Diversity in the community is another sensitive subject to a certain extent. And I say diversity with a big D. To me, that's important in the community because you could make the case that we, the intelligence community, need to look like the world, and we really don't, since that's our beat, if you will. Engaging in professional development activities from entry to retirement. This is always a huge challenge for management. You get a really good analyst, you want to keep them in the job because it really is painful if you let them go off for a sabbatical or do training or go get a master's degree or something like that. And invariably, it's the people that you least want to part with that you need to send through that. So there's always this pulling and hauling from the management standpoint about investing in the future. But it's absolutely crucial that we do that. Possessing a strong understanding of foreign culture through heritage or striving to develop it. This, too, is a big issue today. With having an understanding of the Mideast, and a lot of that understanding only comes from those who are from that heritage. That, of course, runs afoul of our current clearance processes and rules and policies, which, of course, are still Cold War born. So we have a dilemma there to resolve. And of course, I always spoke to making our reward system, pay, promotions, training, assignments, comport with doing business this way. We're in the throes right now in the intelligence community of going to a pay for performance system, which is not the classical civil service. You do your 2 years, you get a step increase, and you can expect promotions and all that sort of thing. This is going to be a very different approach for the intelligence community, and for that matter, the Department of Defense is going to go to that too. National Geospatial Intelligence Agency has been doing pay for performance for about 9 years now. And that is a very different way of rewarding and acknowledging performance of people, either through compensation increases or bonuses, than we're used to. But again, if we're going to recognize quality and recognize the behavior that we really claim we want, then we're going to have to make the reward system comport with that. The second theme then would be efforts to change the culture. Again, training and education to support professional development over an entire career. Activities to develop an environment that focuses on quality as opposed to quantity. You know, how many reports did I get my name on last year, sort of thing, as opposed to, did I produce fewer reports which had greater impact? And of course that means changing the metrics to focus on quantity. And again, to get away from this perish or publish business. I think the promulgation of analytic standards, which we really hadn't had, by the Office of the D&I is a big deal. And again, this recruiting a diverse workforce. Doing things like this, organized outreach to leverage academic and commercial centers of information and expertise. One of the things that is a standard practice now with national intelligence estimates, just as an example, is before it's vetted at the National Intelligence Board, which is kind of the final stamp of approval from all the intelligence elders that sit around a table and bless an NIE. There's a deliberate effort to go out and seek outside readers who are not in the government, not intelligence professionals, if you will, who can read these national intelligence estimates, which are, of course, the key tool, intelligence tool that the president and other policymakers use, and to get an objective outside reading, which we didn't used to do before. I've been participating in one capacity or another in National Intelligence Board or its predecessors for off and on for about 25 years, and we just never did that because we knew all the answers and we knew all the secrets. Well, as we found, the insight may not necessarily come from secrets. And we sort of learned this the hard way. Developing relationships with colleges and universities that have programs that provide, desired skills. All the intelligence agencies do this now. They engender partnerships with universities that are interested in and supportive of developing curricula that prepare from an academic standpoint graduates for duty in those agencies. I'll just cite one example not too far away from here, is the University of Missouri at Columbia, which has an outstanding program to prepare both at the bachelor's and graduate level people for careers in geospatial intelligence analysis. They funded a SCIF, a classified facility on the campus to facilitate research into geospatial intelligence. University of Redlands in California is another one. Virginia Tech is another one. Many of these colleges and universities sort of have interest in and are supportive of developing curricula to help us in the community. Integration of intelligence disciplines, physically and digitally, to improve available synergy. Fancy words, but what that really means to me is, breaking down the stovepipes that we're famous for. Although I will say, oftentimes the term stovepipe, the way we're organized into collection disciplines and that sort of thing, is used pejoratively. There's also an upside to stovepipes because that also is the font of our tradecraft. So as you have a signal intelligence stovepipe or a geospatial intelligence stovepipe or a human stovepipe, yes, that's bad because, we don't want to compartmentalize one another, but also that is the reservoir, if you will, of the tradecraft for each one of those respective disciplines. And it is up to those stovepipes, at least the way we're configured today, to be the protectors, the nurturers, the advancers of that tradecraft. But at the same time, you want to take advantage of the complementary attributes of those disciplines. I just did an obligatory tour through the AOR, the Area of Responsibilities it's called, and visited Iraq and Afghanistan. And there are some eye-watering examples out there of the fusion, as I saw in both Afghanistan and Iraq, the fusion analytic analysis on the fly, if you will, of the collection disciplines, SIGINT and HUMINT particularly. And it's very gratifying. And flying back, you have a lot of time to think on airplanes. I think, how can we import this to the Beltway? Because there are really some dramatic things going on out there. And I guess it's a factor of, somehow when you're in combat, that kind of has a tendency to focus your attention. And it really makes people work together. Ensuring a balance of long-term production is protected from the demands of current intelligence. This is classically a huge issue in intelligence. We get consumed with the urgent, not the important. I remember I was on the commission that investigated the Khobar Towers bombing in 1996, which was another epiphany experience. One of the most intense and controversial things I was involved in my 43 years in intelligence. And as it turned out, got to critique myself. The bombing occurred in June of 1996, and I just retired as director of DIA in 1995. So one of the things we did was a population survey. How many analysts are actually doing long-term research on terrorism? Now, bear in mind, this is 1996. So I went to DIA, the agency I had just left as the director, and we had a grand total of 4 analysts who were devoted exclusively to long-term research on terrorism. Now, many times doing long-term research didn't directly contribute to doing reports, current crisis type, the things that are sexy and get everybody's attention and everybody's interested in today. Huge mistake. And it's responsibility of managers in the intelligence community to somehow insulate people so they can be protected from the press of the day-to-day inbox and be sheltered from that kind of pressure and be allowed to do long-term research. So automation, and this always meant to me, not necessarily automating the continuation of dumb processes. So when I say, intelligently automate, I'm getting a north and south nod from Dale Meyer-Rose, the CIO for the community, that's always a good sign. Thank you, Dale. And of course, this enable us to operate across the intelligence community, supporting collection and analytic processes without interruption. That's, simple thing, sounds great, but oftentimes when you're running a global enterprise, every time zone on the earth, 7 by 24, all kinds of weather and environmental conditions, that's a tough thing. Allowing the collector and the analyst to conduct searches and assess all relevant information to include unclassified information on one classified network. This is a big challenge too. During my sojourns in industry, I have become a big believer in and proponent for the value of open source information. And clearly, I've learned the hard way over the years that the intelligence community, because we got the secrets, doesn't mean we have the insight. And many times the most important insight, the most important relevant information is not in the secret material, it's open source. Interestingly enough, the Dutch government mandated, their parliament mandated that their intelligence community would first resort to open source before they would be permitted to do any kind of secret investigation. It's kind of an interesting concept. So we got to capitalize on open source. I think you've heard about developing A-Space, which I think is a major improvement in the analyst's ability to collaborate with a wide and diverse group in a controlled environment. Development of Alien, an application allowing one query to return all relevant information on the network. Now, that sounds like a really simple thing, something you're used to doing. You're sitting home doing the internet. Well, that's a huge deal for us in Intel. And a lot of this, I think, stems from the secret environment we've always existed in, where there was a premium placed on compartmentation, segmentation of information, where there wasn't a lot of information to be had. And what little we had, we wanted to protect it. And now, of course, we're inundated with information. Very different paradigm. Centrix, asynchronous distance training platform to improve course availability across the intelligence enterprise. This whole business of learning virtually. Great thing. Finally, the last theme I'd talk about a little bit is, which we sometimes don't do, is managing customer expectations. I think, first of all, our customers, everyone, the public, has expectations based on television and internet speed. Why can't we operate like CNN, sort of thing? Of course, customers expect a depth and understanding in intelligence assessments. And of course, again, this desire for speed uh, and reporting is what drives people, what causes analysts to gravitate to the timely, the urgent, not necessarily what's important. So it's incumbent, I think, on intelligence, the community, and certainly its seniors to be anticipatory as much as we possibly can, trying to understand what your customer wants, and then try to tailor things. When I was director of NGA, we ended up sending, as did all the agencies, sending analysts forward to Iraq and Afghanistan, so they could be there and if you've got your people, as I found as an agency director, we had our folks in the same time zone and during the same privations, understanding what the requirement is of that division commander, brigade commander, whatever it was. There's no substitute for that. And then our expert then could translate that into, here's what we can do for you. They didn't know what they didn't know. So that dialogue between the intelligence community and people it's serving is crucial. Another thing we need to do is and this is to our customers, is demonstrating why it's a good thing if we don't put out as much products numerically as we have in the past. Fewer is better if the quality's there. Making sure, and this is, to me is crucial, making sure customers, partners, the public, the Congress understand the difference between mysteries and secrets. Secrets are things that are knowable, that somehow you could actually find out or glean if you devoted the resources to it. Mysteries, on the other hand, are unknowns. The intelligence community, these are known only unto God. What's Kim Jong-il going to do tomorrow? Well, he doesn't know, so how can we know? Analysts, the intelligence community basically is in the business of an uncertainty and trying to attenuate it. We're never going to eliminate it, but certainly I think where we earn our keep is in our efforts to at least reduce uncertainty for a decision maker, whether the decision maker is sitting in the White House or a foxhole. But we're always dealing with limited information. And that's why it's important, to make the intelligence process not a singular, unitary, linear thing, but a collaborative, collective thing where you're bringing together all the best minds to be brought to bear on a problem. And of course, the more diversity, the better. I always remember when I was director of DIA, Secretary of State, then General Powell, who was chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, his maxim to intelligence people is always, tell me what you know, tell me what you think, and make sure you make the distinction between the two. So that's really all I had to say this morning in the way of kind of going over those three themes. And so I guess whatever time's available, I'll be happy to try to address some questions. And there's the first one. Let's see. What, if anything, is being done to rationalize security requirements and standards between the DoD and NIP intelligence bodies? Well, the aforementioned effort that Admiral McConnell and I are sponsoring together with Mr. Clay Johnson, who's the Deputy Director of the Office of Management Budget. The Office of Management Budget actually establishes clearance standards for the entire government. Probably the intelligence community is the most demanding, has the most rigorous requirements and all that. So Admiral McConnell and I have put together a team, a tiger team, composed of experts and industry, academics are represented in this, on how we could rationalize the clearance process, capitalizing on automation. And what we're finding is we can do a lot, both in initial clearance actions as well as sustaining clearances after people are brought in through automation. And our objective, without prolonging this, would be to make investigations, which are the long pole in the tent often, as the exception rather than the rule. And if we can develop a so-called clean case where they're through automation, since there's so much of this information that can be made available, assuming the applicant gives us permission, that you can do this in a much quicker fashion. This will literally save billions of dollars, man hours, let alone untold frustration that exists with the current system, which of course is all born out of the Cold War. So we are together on this since, again, a large part of the DNI's domain is in the Department of Defense. Let's see, what are... well, I think, let's see, the next one was launched an effort, the USDI has launched an effort to reinvent defense analysis. The efforts are being directed by Deborah Barger, actually. How would that effort link into ODNI's analytic transformation effort being discussed here today? Well, we're pretty much in sync on this. One of the purposes of this dual hatting arrangement, which I had suggested to both Secretary Gates and Director McConnell, was to obviate some of these and overcome some of these seams that have existed between Department of Defense and the DNI. And Admiral McConnell and I are old personal and professional buds. We go back about 20 years and at various times have worked for one another. And, he got his phone call and I got mine, and he kind of said, well, if you'll do it, I'll do it. And so our commitment for the remainder of the administration is to try to work this as a seamless enterprise. So in all these efforts, whether it's clearance transformation or analytic transformation, we're trying to work this as a single entity. Let's see, regarding dead horses. Well, somebody at least heard that part of the pitch. Most of us here would like to ride a fresh horse. Do you think our efforts to develop a saddle and bridle are adequate to mount and ride the icy horse? And time being of the essence, do you see a lasting impact beyond this administration from the efforts you are putting forth today? Absolutely. I wouldn't, nor would Admiral McConnell, we wouldn't be doing this because, neither of us or campaign for these jobs if we didn't think we could make some lasting impact. And I thought the one thing that Secretary Gates said to me when we talked last December was what we can do as a team is to build a foundation for the next administration, whoever wins, when they come into office. And that's precisely what we're trying to do. These reforms require significant change in the workforce. We've heard about rewards for those who embrace change. What about disincentives for those who refuse to embrace change? Well, I believe, frankly, that going to a pay-for-performance system is going to force management in the community to make qualitative distinctions between and among employees in terms of incentive increases, bonuses, and things like that. And so the kind of desired behavior, there will be the opportunity then to reward the behavior that we all want to see and to disincentivize the behavior that we don't want to see. And of course, one of the, as I found at NGA, in my 5 years there, one of the most effective management tools you have for transformation is attrition, if you get my drift. Okay, let's scroll up here. What is the role of industry in analytic transformation? Are there opportunities for industry to invest in partnership with the IC with a reasonable expectation of return on investment? For example, is it possible for industry to sponsor, for example, pay for industry analysts to receive the same kinds of training that government analysts receive? That's a very good question, and that issue came up when I was at NGA, and I know we had some debates with lawyers about that, whether that was possible to provide the same kind of training and a government provided. And when I last left that movie, which I haven't visited that issue in some time, that's actually, I don't think, possible. I could be wrong. I'm not up on that. Your concerns about allowing time for some analysts to engage in the necessary long-term research resonate with this former SNTI analyst. The SNTI analytic community is in crisis. They don't have time to do their long-term analysis, but are doing what I call op and tell on science topics. What are you going to do to address this issue? That's a very good point. And I'm part of that crime, actually, because in the wake of the Cold War, some people, forget history here. In the wake of the Cold War, I know when I was director of DIA in the early 90s, we were under a mandate to reduce our manpower at DIA by 22.5%. I distinctly remember that number. It wasn't 22, not 23, but 22.5%. It was a congressional mandate. And so this was a very painful, traumatic thing for us to manage. And at the time, I was kind of happy that we were able to get through it, make that kind of reduction, and not riff anybody, although maybe we should have, but we didn't. And of course, what that did was create a huge bathtub, since the way we did that was through attrition. We just didn't hire people. So we created a bathtub for about 5 or 6 years where there was very little hiring in the community. In fact, when I arrived at NGA, all the agencies were on a downslope. We were reducing people, facilities, all this sort of thing. And then 9/11 happens, and all of a sudden we're expanding again. One of the casualties in that, and all of that, was S&TI, Scientific and Technical Intelligence. That was a huge effort, of course, in the heyday of the Cold War, since we were facing a very formidable foe, adversary in the form of the Soviet Union, which had a huge scientific and technical community of its own. Well, the demographics were that S&TI workforce aged and left as a part of that drawdown post-Cold War. So now we are trying to reconstitute that. I believe Robert Cardillo was here yesterday. I've been working especially closely with Robert and he's got some good efforts going to reconstitute S&TI using the collective capabilities of the DIA, the Defense Intelligence Agency, agencies, as well as the service production centers, meaning the National Air and Space Intelligence Center, the Air Force production arm at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base, the ONI, the Office of Naval Intelligence at Suitland, and the Army's National Ground Intelligence Center at Charlottesville, Virginia, and using that as a collegium to reconstitute, re-strengthen, and refocus on S&TI. Let's see, will we ever get to a point where the U.S. government has a single set of standards for security issues beyond clearances? Certification and accreditation, that as Dale Marrowrose can well attest, is a big issue. It's not exactly my compartment, but certainly I would like to see that as a constant complaint I hear, particularly from industry. And I just lost the rest of that question, so my memory ain't that good anymore.
Jim, I think we have one question from the audience over here.
Oh, okay. I can't see, so you're going to have to help me.
I'm wondering, there were changes that were made by your predecessor and his boss in terms of intelligence collection and and that resulted in not only some unhappiness between certain agencies, but a lot of tripping over people, one agency tripping over another in places that they didn't expect to trip over each other. A lot of unhappiness when the new director of the CIA came in. He created a new board for intelligence, human management. Other steps were taken to try and deconflict the problems that had arisen. And I'm wondering, now that you're in the Pentagon, what other steps are being taken to try and mitigate some of the tensions?
Well, first of all, I take some respectful exception to the preface of your question. I think what this refers to is what I've found to be a lot of hyperbole in the media and other places. And I do have a little background on this, since when I was director of DIA, I was the founder of the Defense Human Service. And so and then I came back as a contractor in the late 90s, was asked by DOD to do a study on the state of health of human in the department. Of course, this is all prior to 9/11. In this capacity, since I've been in the job since, well, I was sworn in on April 13th, Friday the 13th. I don't know if that's a good omen or not. But anyway, I have found that actually there have been some tremendous things done in the confluence of the agency, the special ops community, and human in general. And this was reaffirmed on my trip to Iraq and Afghanistan a week before last. And the cooperation, the teamwork is out there is superb. We may have our little gun battles in the Beltway, but out where it counts, it's really eye-watering, fantastic effort. Now, that said, I've certainly looked into all this. In fact, one of the marching orders that the Secretary gave me was to ask me to go away and look at all that. Because there's been a lot of change, which I think is quite appropriate. This has become a growth business, a growth industry, if you will, in the intelligence community, and well, it should. And the Secretary has asked me to go away and look at that. Is what we're doing necessary, appropriate, legitimate? Do we need to make any changes in the oversight processes with the Congress? And I have a fairly high-level blue ribbon team, which is headed by a very distinguished Army 3-star operator, not an intelligence guy, that is now examining this whole issue. But what I've found in practice since I've been in the job in April, that again, much of this is, I think, exaggerated hyperbole, redundancy intended. Well, I lost my question. Does that mean I'm done? Oh, okay. As we move towards increased collaboration, what steps do we need to take to maintain the ability for analysts to look at the evidence and independently come to their own conclusions? This is actually a very insightful question, because one of the challenges that seniors have is in protecting what I would call academic freedom of analysts. And you always have this thing in the back of your mind as intelligence senior that you're telling the facts, the unvarnished facts, as best we know them, to a policymaker, and you have to be sure that you protect against the politicization, if you will, of intelligence. I'm, in the current job, particularly sensitive to that, since it was I got the wire brushing during my confirmation process from the Senate Armed Services Committee about this very thing. And there is no rule book here. There's no formula. Politicizing intelligence and preventing it, it's somewhat like pornography. You know it when you see it. Who will be your lead to start the process of rewarding new behavior in the government, taking risks, changing bad paradigms, rewarding performance, not time and service? Well, I guess I am. I became a big proponent of that, big practitioner of it, I guess, when I was director of NGA. Again, I think pay for performance is one way to change behavior. Speaking on managing customer expectations, meeting or managing expectations important, but what needs to be done to exceed those expectations? Is this a goal of the collaboration effort we're trying to move forward? Well, I think it is. I think, I don't know, that's a tough question. What I've found over the years is when you can kind of get into the mind of the person you're trying to serve, or the office, or whatever your customer is, so that if you understand what he or she is thinking and what he or she is concerned about, and then hopefully that enables you to be, as an intelligence person, anticipatory and predictive. Now, having said that, I'm reminded I served as a J2, or Director of Intelligence, for 3 of the warfighting commands. The first one was in Korea. And in Korea, basically, the intelligence setup is patterned after the U.S. Army, which is, of course, the dominant service out there. So they use the Army practice and staff practices. And one of the things that mystified me when I first got there, I was an Air Force guy and basically doing an Army job, was that in addition to intelligence, I was also responsible for weather. So I had an Air Force weather squadron, had little detachments all over the Korean Peninsula, and why am I in charge of weather? Well, I figured it out. It's because basically the commander's expectation is that both intelligence and weather people got to be clairvoyant. Next, any other? I can't see if there are any other questions out there. Yes.
Jim, Is this on?
Yep.
Jim, I'm asking this because I know you have some very special expertise in this area. What do you think the academic community can do to support the recommendations that you're making?
Well, during my most recent brief sojourn in out of the government, which lasted about 6 months, I taught at Georgetown, and which was a fantastic experience. I really enjoyed it. Plus, what was cool about it is every semester I got a new group of people that hadn't heard any of the jokes or war stories. So I got to tell them all over again. Anyway, what I found is I'd sort of known this before, but it was certainly reinforced by my Georgetown experience, was, incidentally, I was sponsored in a chair by INSA. I need to mention that, which was great. And I think it was a stark reminder to me of really how little, there really isn't a lot of difference between what you can do in a class, what is known and can be done and discussed and analyzed and thought about and contemplated, considered in an unclassified environment versus a classified. There really is very little distinction there when it comes down to it. Maybe levels of degree, some spiffy, spooky insight you might get from a secret, but by and large, particularly if you're trying to understand regions, countries, international phenomena, global trends, this sort of thing, the intelligence community has no monopoly on this. So I think just from the standpoint of the expertise that can be brought to bear from the academic world is huge, and this is why this is, I think, is a great idea. And my view on this is I think over the last 10 or 20 years has really changed about the value of interacting, outreaching to academic institutions. I spoke earlier about agencies having connections with colleges and universities, those that want to engage. Now, some places, the college, university institutions are not particularly interested in having any kind of a connection with spies. Okay, that's fine. But there are a lot of others, and increasingly, well, more so since 9/11, that are willing to engage with the community. So I'm all for clearing academics, having them available for consultant purposes, having institutions do research for the community, to the extent that you can get a college or university to allow students to do studies, master's theses or PhD dissertations that we in the intelligence community can use. This is a way of really extending our capability, our brain power, manpower out beyond the narrow confines of the government. So there's all kinds of potential there, and we certainly want to do it. Sure.
Say one thing.
Hey, give me the hook whenever.
No. We have plenty of time. We have more questions online. The one thing, especially for you old school guys out there, just so you know, if you're sitting out there thinking, now I'll just wait and catch Jim at a break. Jim's got a meeting with the SecDef this afternoon. Jim doesn't have a break. So this is your opportunity. If you've been sitting there waiting to talk to him after he's done and catch him in the hallway, his hallway time is from here to the car. So we've got more online questions, and we'll turn back to those. But if you're thinking about asking him something, now's the time.
Let's see. To follow up on your comment, please talk to specifics of how the lessons learned from the Iraq and Afghanistan conflicts will be collected and disseminated to the community. How will we recruit and retrain the veterans of the front where love, intel, and operations have been fused? Great question. And one of the my travel mates on this trip was Lieutenant General Jeff Kimmons, who is the G2 or the head of intelligence for the United States Army. And we both came to the conclusion that one of the things we absolutely positively must do is to record and document from a doctrinal standpoint, which of course will influence training, the way intelligence business is being done out there at the pointy end of the stick. I just cite one example which is a whole new business for us, which is media exploitation. And by that, exploiting cell phones, laptops, and this sort of thing, and doing it in a tactically relevant manner, meaning doing it quick. Well, this is a whole new thing for us. There's a field, it's now called, the buzz term is human terrain. This is like the classical Army preparation of the battle space, only it's applied to the human dynamics. Understanding the dynamics of a village or neighborhood in Baghdad, who the good guys are, who the bad guys are, what are the political dynamics. And that's not something you're going to discern from our, all our satellites and all that stuff. There is a degree of fidelity there that only the best sensor is the two-legged sensor. The soldier on the ground is there and understands that stuff. So one of the challenges we have, another way we have to change, is how do we collect that kind of insight and data so that the next unit that deploys out there and replaces the one that just left don't have to start all over again. So that's a challenge that we have to deal with. So there's a number of things here that have affected the classical way we do business. In the military, the classical arrangement in the Army, I don't mean this pejoratively, is the higher up the food chain, the command food chain you go, the more intelligence capability you get in terms of analysts, computer capability and all that. And as you go down the food chain, you get less and less. And really, that's upside down. Where you need the intelligence capability, the tactical intelligence capability, is at the platoon or company level. They need translators, they need humaners, they need debriefers. Another new thing out there I found is the assignment of law enforcement people down at the brigade level. Now, what do they do? Well, in an IED, improvised explosive device context, a really valuable skill is the forensic investigation skills that law enforcement people have that we in the classical intelligence business don't have. And they look upon an IED event a much different way than classical intelligence analysts. Well, that's another thing we need to figure out. What's the doctrine for that? And how do you, and so I met a couple of retired FBI agents brought back as contractors and annuitants assigned down to brigade level, advising the intelligence and the commander of these brigades on, avoiding IEDs. So all these things that, we never did before, that we must record, document, because that's what's going to affect how we train people in the schoolhouses. What is your vision for the interface between Homeland Security, domestic law enforcement, and national intelligence? That is another great issue. It's also emblematic of another huge change for us in the intelligence community. Prior to 9/11, there was always this firewall that existed between our foreign intelligence establishment and domestic. You just didn't mix the two. I was a young pup at NSA, a young captain back in the 70s during the Church Pike hearings. So I kind of went through that about, abuses, well-intended though they may be, involving surveillance of U.S. citizens. Obviously 9/11 changed all that. Terrorists don't respect nice, neat national boundaries and all this sort of thing. And so that's been kind of a struggle for us, frankly, figuring out how do we bring to bear the tremendous capabilities of the national intelligence community, always heretofore focused on the foreign targets, and use that in a domestic context. And of course that raises understandable civil liberties concerns. And so we've had our challenges in sorting that out. I will cite an example because I know about it. I was involved in it personally, which was in the aftermath of Rita Katrina and bringing to bear the national technical means, our overhead surveillance systems, in a domestic context to help rescue people, to help with the planning for reconstruction, rehabilitation, all that sort of thing, and using those resources. Locating, for example, the 6,000 drill rigs in the Gulf of Mexico, some of which had been moved, which of course poses a huge hazard to navigation. So using resources in that manner as an example of which had traditionally, classically been used in a foreign context, and then bringing to bear in a domestic context. I think the Department of Homeland Security has a huge and critically important role in the intelligence arena, because I believe they need to be the filter, the broker, the interlocutor, if you will, between state, local, tribal people, all the others who have an interest and need for intelligence in a domestic context. But I think it must go through the Department of Homeland Security and then be levied on us.
General Clapper, quick question for you. I'm right in front of you.
Oh,
There you go. As
it's
an
like
owner
the
of a,
interrogation lights. are,
yes,
you know.
sir. So that's the reason I'm going to ask you the question. Look into the light. No. As one of the owners of a number of analysts out there, one of my biggest challenges is the competition with the civilian contracting community, as highlighted recently by the $1 billion offer on the table to hire more analysts by DIA.
Yeah.
What
Again, a
is-
media hyperbole, incidentally.
Yes, sir, but-
That's untrue.
That part I understand, but the real question is, I still have to compete to try to maintain at government salaries with the civilian community. And the former DNI, and I believe this DNI, are both looking at how we can wean ourselves away from that civilian contracting, you know, in and outdoor that we are competing
Right.
against. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Well, first of all, I think in my discussions with a lot of the young people that I engaged with when I was director of NGA, is, you know, this comes down to a very personal decision. You have to decide whether you want to continue as a government employee, and there are certain advantages in terms of influence and decision making that you'll have, even though the financial rewards aren't as great as they could be, essentially doing the same line of work as a contractor. And people have to make that kind of decision. Now, one thing we did do at NGA is, because this happened a couple occasions, where we hired people, got them cleared, which is a painful process to start with, and ran them through our 17-week training program, and they quit and went to work for a contractor. So just like, you know, military academy and naval academy grads, they go through, get a government education, they have a certain obligation. They got to pay back to the government. So that's one thing I would recommend we do as a way of forestalling that. Now, having said all that, and I think, you know, there's still a spirit of patriotism and government service and all that, that, you know, we're going to keep, and as long as we can make government service satisfying and rewarding to people, they'll stay with it. I will tell you, though, my own personal attitude about contractors and contracting changed a lot after I became one. And then when I came back, I was out for 6 years as a contractor doing intelligence work for the most part. And then I came back to the government as an agency director, and my definition of my phrase, the sacred trust of the government, got very small. In other words, I think, you know, contractors can do a lot, and are doing a lot, and will continue to do a lot. In fact, if all the contractors didn't come to work tomorrow, the intelligence community would be out of business. And that's not all bad. And I don't think this preoccupation with size of contracts or numbers of contractors, I think that misses the point entirely. The key thing is the government's ability to manage, oversee the work of contractors from a quality standpoint. So you must maintain sufficient competence in the government workforce to oversee the work of contractors and ensure that they are complying with their contractual obligations, and the government in turn is meeting its financial and fiduciary responsibilities. That's the key thing, not how many there are. There are tremendous advantages to using contractor workforce, because you can expand and contract that workforce a lot easier than you can the government. I think if you bring to bear properly all the beneficial aspects of competition, creativity, innovation that comes from contractors, that's a good thing. But the key thing is the government's ability to oversee and manage and monitor what contractors do. Back to this? Okay. Out here? Oh, from here. Okay. Well, let's find one I like. Well, what's your view on the role of contractors to conduct analysis? Well, I just talked about that. Is this an inherent government function? Where is the line? Well, that's a great question. Obviously, I think there are certain fundamental things in the government that must be done by government employees. legal advice, IGs, contracting offices, that sort of thing. I think policy-making positions, leadership positions should be government employees. Let's see. That's a question I don't understand, so I think we'll skip that one. Who in the government needs to take the lead in trying to break down barriers of sharing sensitive databases between FBI, CIDI, and local governments? Well, I think that's a collective responsibility. Certainly, the DNI himself is crucial to that in establishing policies. But again, I would repeat the importance of the Department of Homeland Security and being the federal level interlocutor broker for fulfilling the needs of state and local, tribal, and regional government entities. For those of us at NISH and Telsoft doing human factor, human terrain work, how can we help government and purchasing and procurement folks to understand what we do? And intel groups don't know how to define what we know and are providing others. It's a good question. I understand the frustration involved in this. And this is something that, the asker of the question certainly understands. Gaining insight and understanding what human terrain and human factors is all about this is a new thing. And so you're going to have to, I think, bear with us. I certainly have personally gained a lot of insight in the potential for what we're calling human terrain. Another area that I'd mentioned is biometrics and the application here, and many applications, in both intelligence and security, being used extensively in the forward area now. And again, we have to, and of course this has privacy and civil liberties concerns. It certainly does, it poses a challenge to the concept of cover and operating under cover, since with biometrics it's pretty hard to hide. And so maybe the concept is the only way you're going to be undercover is to live it. Will the COCOMs be obligated to embrace analytic transformation like A-Space and other enterprise efforts, so there will not be impediments to sharing collaboration between the Beltway organization and the warfighters? Well, the term obligated sort of connotes sort of pejorative thing. I think they're going to want to engage in this, and not to worry, the gospel will spread. I'm convinced, and certainly if there are any bureaucratic or policy obstacles to that, particularly operating the defense intelligence establishment, meaning DIA and the intelligence capabilities at the commands. In fact, I've got a team out now looking at exactly that as we speak. We'll certainly do all we can to remove such obstacles. And it says no more online questions, so I guess I'm done.
I think that's it. Jim, thank you very much for your time.